My name is Walter, 63 years old, retired architect, who designed upscale residential homes for 35 years. Throughout my career, I provided generous financial support to my only daughter, Miranda, and her husband, Philip. I never imagined they would abandon me in Venice during our European family vacation. The memory still cuts deep, overhearing them laugh about the old man bothering them while I was sick in the bathroom. Their betrayal forced me to recognize hard truths and take decisive action they never saw coming. Let me know where you're watching from, and subscribe if you've ever had to teach an ungrateful family member a life-changing lesson about respect and consequences. I built my career as an architect, specializing in luxury homes across the northeastern United States. My designs became known for blending functionality with elegant aesthetics, earning me a solid reputation and comfortable income. That career became my anchor after losing my wife, Catherine, in a devastating car accident when our daughter, Miranda, was just 15 years old. Catherine's death shattered our world. One rainy Tuesday evening, a drunk driver crossed the median, and just like that, our family of 3 became 2. Miranda and I were left to navigate our grief together. I remember the night of the funeral, finding Miranda curled up in her mother's closet, wrapped in Catherine's favorite sweater. That moment crystallized my commitment. I would devote everything to ensuring Miranda's well-being. I put dating aside completely. There were a few women who expressed interest over the years, but I always found reasons why the timing wasn't right. The truth was, I couldn't divide my attention between a new relationship and being there for Miranda. Every parent-teacher conference dance recital and late-night emotional conversation took priority. I wanted to be fully present for my daughter during those critical formative years. Miranda and I developed a special closeness through high school. She excelled academically, while I cheered from the sidelines at every opportunity. When she was accepted to Brentwood University, a prestigious private college, I didn't hesitate to pay the steep tuition, despite the financial strain. I remembered Catherine saying education was the one gift no one could ever take away. So I made it happen, liquidating some investments to cover the costs. During Miranda's sophomore year at Brentwood, she called me excitedly about declaring architecture as her major, inspired by my career. I felt incredibly proud, though she later switched to business administration. Still, those phone calls discussing design principles and famous buildings remain some of my favorite memories with her. She met Philip during her MBA program. When she first brought him home for Thanksgiving, he seemed polite, ambitious, and genuinely interested in my work. He asked thoughtful questions about my projects and complimented my home's design. I was impressed by his confidence and the way Miranda lit up around him. But as their relationship progressed, concerns began to surface. Philip talked constantly about luxury brands, expensive vacations, and status symbols. He drove a German sports car that seemed beyond the means of a graduate student, and I noticed Miranda's spending habits changing to match his lifestyle. When I gently questioned her about their financial plans, she brushed off my concerns, saying Philip had big career prospects ahead. Their wedding 3 years ago coincided with my retirement. After 35 years of drawing blueprints and overseeing construction sites, I was ready to step back. Miranda and Philip wanted an extravagant ceremony at a historic estate with 200 guests. The final bill came to just over $80,000, nearly depleting my dedicated savings for her wedding. I never told Miranda the financial toll it took. I wanted her day to be perfect. As my retirement gift to them, I provided the 20% down payment for their first house, a 4-bedroom colonial in an upscale neighborhood they couldn't otherwise afford. I had secretly hoped they might choose something more modest and invest the difference, but I kept those thoughts to myself. The day they got their keys, Miranda hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thanks, Dad. We couldn't have done this without you." Those words made every dollar worth it. What I didn't know then was that Philip's marketing business was struggling from the start. 6 months after the wedding, he approached me about investing in his company. He presented impressive projections and marketing materials, and I wanted to support my new son-in-law's ambitions. I contributed $75,000 as a silent partner money that was meant to fund my retirement travels. As months passed, I began noticing subtle changes in Miranda. Our weekly dinners became monthly, then occasional. She started canceling plans last minute, usually with excuses related to Philip's business commitments or social obligations. When we did spend time together, she seemed distracted, constantly checking her phone and steering conversations toward their material acquisitions or social connections. My retirement home, a modest but beautiful house I had designed myself, began to feel increasingly empty. Every corner held memories. The kitchen where Catherine and I had taught Miranda to bake, the living room where we'd had family game nights, the backyard where I'd built her a treehouse. Now at 63, I found myself rattling around alone. My calls to my daughter often going to voicemail. That's when I proposed the European vacation, 3 weeks exploring Italy, France, and Spain. I had always dreamed of showing Miranda the architectural wonders that had inspired my career. The Colosseum, Sagrada Familia, the Louvre. More importantly, I hoped that removing us from our daily routines might help us reconnect. When I suggested including Philip, Miranda's enthusiasm noticeably increased, and I took that as a positive sign. I had no idea then that the trip meant to bridge the growing distance between us would instead reveal just how wide that gap had become, and ultimately force me to face some painful truths about my daughter and the man she had married. The moment Miranda agreed to the European vacation, I threw myself into planning with enthusiasm I hadn't felt in years. I spent hours researching the perfect itinerary that would balance cultural experiences with relaxation. Italy would come first, Rome, Florence, and Venice, followed by a train to Paris, then finishing in Barcelona. I ordered guidebooks, downloaded language apps, and even took an introductory Italian course at the community center. When I shared the initial itinerary with Miranda and Philip over dinner, I noticed Philip scrolling through his phone while I spoke. "Dad, what about accommodations?" Miranda interrupted as I described the Vatican museums. "We were thinking 5-star hotels would be best. Philip has back issues, and we need proper beds." I hadn't budgeted for luxury accommodations throughout the trip. My retirement income, while comfortable, had its limits, especially after the various financial contributions I'd made to their lives. "I was thinking of charming boutique hotels," I explained. "Places with character that are still comfortable." Philip finally looked up from his phone. "Walter, if we're going all the way to Europe, we should do it right. Those small hotels can be so hit or miss with air conditioning and modern amenities." Miranda quickly added, "Plus, better hotels are usually more centrally located. It'll save us time commuting to sites." They exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. I adjusted my plans and budget accordingly. The additional cost meant dipping into my emergency fund, but I told myself this investment in our relationship was worth it. When I emailed them the new hotel selections, all 4- and 5-star properties, Miranda's reply was simply, "These look fine." 2 months before departure, Miranda suggested we go shopping for new clothes for the trip. I was touched by the invitation until I realized she expected me to finance new wardrobes for both her and Philip. "European streets are so fashionable, Dad. We can't show up looking like tourists," she explained, while selecting an expensive linen suit for Philip. I found myself at the register paying for their clothing, while Miranda chatted with the sales associate about Italian leather goods she planned to buy. The total made me wince, but I said nothing. That evening, I reviewed my finances and quietly canceled my landscaping service and postponed some home maintenance to accommodate the mounting expenses. A week before departure, I hosted a dinner at my home to finalize details. I'd prepared Catherine's famous lasagna recipe, Miranda's childhood favorite. Philip arrived complaining about parking on my cramped street, while Miranda immediately began rearranging the table settings I'd carefully set out. "I've made a list of restaurants we should try," I said, passing them printed recommendations from my research. "Many need reservations weeks in advance, so I thought we could decide tonight which ones appeal to you both." Philip barely glanced at the list. "We prefer to be spontaneous, Walter. The best experiences aren't planned." He turned to Miranda. "Remember that amazing place we found in Aspen when we got lost? That was incredible." She agreed, their private memory excluding me entirely. "Dad, we appreciate the research, but let's not overschedule. Philip gets stressed with too many commitments." I nodded, tucking the restaurant list away, while the lasagna grew cold on their plates. They left early, citing preparations they needed to make, though. I noticed them laughing in their car for several minutes before driving away. Despite these disappointments, my excitement remained. I spent evenings studying Italian and French phrases, determined to help navigate our travels. "Dove il bagno?" I practiced. "Where is the bathroom? Potremmo avere il conto, per favore? Could we have the check, please?" I wrote dozens of useful phrases on index cards, imagining Miranda's appreciation for my efforts. Departure day arrived with perfect early summer weather. I'd arranged for a car service to take us to the airport, allowing extra time for security. When the driver arrived at my house, I was waiting outside with 2 modestly sized suitcases. We drove to Miranda and Philip's home, where they emerged 40 minutes later than planned, with 4 large suitcases and multiple carry-ons. "Sorry we're running late," Miranda said, not sounding particularly apologetic. Philip couldn't decide which shoes to bring. The driver managed to Tetris all their luggage into the trunk, while I silently calculated the overweight baggage fees we'd likely incur. At the airport, I presented our first-class tickets, an extravagance I'd justified as starting our trip in comfort, especially for the long transatlantic flight. "Business class would have been fine, Dad," Miranda said, when she saw the tickets, though her tone suggested she expected nothing less. As our plane lifted off American soil, I gazed out the window with genuine optimism. Surely away from work pressures and daily distractions, we would reconnect. I had visions of sharing wine at sidewalk cafes, discussing art in museums, and creating new family memories. Looking at Miranda and Philip scrolling through their phones beside me, I pushed away the nagging voice, suggesting I might be the only one with these expectations. Our arrival in Rome brought a blast of Mediterranean heat and the chaotic energy of Italian traffic. As we emerged from the airport, I felt a surge of excitement. "We're actually here," I said. But Miranda and Philip were busy arguing about whether they should have brought more adapter plugs for their devices. The taxi delivered us to our first luxury hotel near the Spanish Steps. While I handled check-in, speaking my carefully practiced Italian, to the receptionist's amusement, Miranda and Philip inspected the lobby with critical eyes. "I hope the rooms are bigger than they look online," I heard Philip mutter. It was the first hint of many disappointments to come. Our first few days in Rome held moments of beauty, punctuated by growing tension. The Colosseum stood magnificent against the blue Italian sky, but Philip complained about the heat and crowds. "Couldn't we have come in a less touristy season?" he asked, as we waited in line despite the skip-the-queue tickets I'd purchased. I tried engaging them with historical facts I'd memorized. "The Colosseum could hold up to 50,000 spectators," I explained enthusiastically, "and they could fill it with water for mock naval battles." "Dad, we can read the guidebook ourselves," Miranda said, checking her reflection in her phone camera. Later, scrolling through her social media, I noticed she'd posted selfies without mentioning I was there. At the Trevi Fountain, I gave them each a coin. Legend says if you throw a coin in, you'll return to Rome someday, I said, demonstrating the traditional over-the-shoulder toss. Miranda half-heartedly tossed hers, while Philip pocketed his muttering about tourist traps. That evening, I overheard them in their room through the thin hotel walls. "Your dad is treating this like some educational field trip," Philip said. "It's boring." "I know," Miranda replied. "But he's paying, so we just have to get through it." My heart sank, but I convinced myself they were just tired from travel. The next morning at breakfast, I suggested adjusting our itinerary. "Why don't you two pick today's activities, whatever you'd enjoy most?" They chose an exclusive shopping district, where I spent 3 hours waiting on uncomfortable chairs outside fitting rooms. Miranda emerged with bags from designers I recognized only from magazine covers, handing me her credit card that was linked to my account for emergencies. For our third night, I'd reserved a table at a renowned restaurant, calling months in advance and requesting their finest table for my family. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in my best suit, and waited. And waited. Miranda and Philip appeared 40 minutes late, by which time the staff had given our table to another party. "Sorry, Dad. Philip needed to make some business calls," Miranda explained without looking up from her phone. We were seated near the kitchen instead, where Philip complained loudly about the service in English, embarrassing me, as the staff clearly understood. As we traveled by train to Florence, I struggled with the luggage, while Philip walked ahead with empty hands. My back ached from lifting their heavy suitcases, but I said nothing. Florence's Renaissance splendor temporarily lifted my spirits. Standing before Botticelli's Birth of Venus in the Uffizi Gallery, Miranda briefly showed genuine interest. "I had a print of this in my college dorm room," she said, studying the painting. "Your mother loved this piece," I told her softly. "She said Venus reminded her of you, same graceful neck." For a moment I glimpsed my old Miranda, as her eyes glistened with emotion. The moment shattered when Philip called from another gallery. "Miranda, come see this painting that looks exactly like that influencer you follow." The rest of our time in Florence passed in a blur of Philip's complaints. The hotel room was too traditional. The authentic Tuscan restaurant was trying too hard, and the Ponte Vecchio was just a bridge with overpriced jewelry stores. Miranda increasingly echoed his sentiments, her brief connection to her mother's memory apparently forgotten. One afternoon, we joined a walking tour of medieval Florence. The cobblestone streets proved challenging for my 63-year-old knees, and I gradually fell behind the group. I assumed Miranda or Philip would notice my absence, but when I finally caught up nearly an hour later, they seemed surprised to see me. "Oh, there you are," Miranda said. "We thought maybe you'd gone back to the hotel." "You didn't answer your phone," Philip added accusingly. "I don't think I get good reception here," I said, though I knew I'd never received a call. Checking my phone later, confirmed no missed calls or texts asking about my whereabouts. That night alone in my room, I scrolled through my photos from the trip so far. In most images, Miranda and Philip were distant figures, their backs to the camera, as they walked ahead of me. There were no photos of the three of us together, no smiling family moments I'd envisioned. I found myself looking at pictures of buildings and statues instead of people, architectural details standing in for human connection. As we prepared to leave for Venice, I felt a growing unease. The pattern was clear. I was financing a luxury European vacation for a couple who barely tolerated my presence. Yet I clung to hope that Venice, with its romantic canals and magical atmosphere, might somehow bridge the widening gap between us. If anything could rekindle our connection, surely it would be the floating city where Catherine and I had spent our honeymoon 35 years earlier. I never imagined that Venice, the city of love, would become the place where I would discover just how little love remained in my relationship with my daughter. Venice greeted us with golden late-afternoon sunlight, reflecting off the Grand Canal as our water taxi approached the hotel. The sight momentarily took my breath away. The faded grandeur of the centuries-old buildings, the gentle lapping of water against stone, the distant sound of church bells. I'd splurged on our Venetian accommodations, booking a historic hotel that had once been a patrician palace. "This is where your mother and I stayed on our honeymoon," I told Miranda as we entered the ornate lobby with its Murano glass chandeliers and terrazzo floors. She said it was like sleeping inside a jewelry box. Miranda nodded distractedly, while Philip immediately approached the front desk with complaints about our transfer from the train station. I watched my daughter, hoping for some flicker of interest in this connection to her mother, but she was focused on her phone, apparently posting their arrival on social media. The hotel clerk apologetically informed us that due to a booking error, our 2 separate rooms had been combined into a larger family suite with a shared living area. While I was secretly pleased at the prospect of more family time, Philip was visibly annoyed. "This is unacceptable," he said loudly. "We specifically booked private rooms." "Sir, we have upgraded you to our finest suite as compensation," the clerk explained. "It has separate bedrooms with ensuite bathrooms, and we've added complimentary champagne and daily breakfast." I quickly intervened before Philip could escalate further. "That sounds wonderful, thank you for accommodating us." I handed over my credit card for incidentals. "Please charge any room service or extra expenses to this card." Our suite was undeniably beautiful, with tall windows overlooking a small canal, antique furniture, and silk wallpaper. Yet Philip immediately began pointing out flaws: the slightly uneven floors, the patina of age on the mirrors, the lack of a modern coffee maker. "This place is a museum, not a hotel," he complained, testing the mattress with obvious disapproval. For our first evening, I had arranged a private gondola ride followed by dinner at a restaurant recommended as Venice's most authentic non-tourist spot. The gondolier, an older gentleman named Marco, shared fascinating stories about the buildings we passed in melodic Italian-accented English. "That palazzo belonged to a merchant who brought spices from the East," he explained, pointing to a particularly grand building. "See the Arabian influences in the window designs." I was captivated, but looking back at Miranda and Philip, I saw they were taking selfies with the sunset in the background, completely ignoring Marco's commentary. When the gondolier began singing a traditional Venetian song, Philip rolled his eyes, muttering, "Tourist trap," just loudly enough for me to hear. Dinner began pleasantly enough. The small restaurant was filled with locals, and the owner greeted us warmly, especially after I attempted a few phrases in Italian. I ordered regional specialties for us to share: squid ink pasta, seafood risotto, and fresh grilled fish. "Dad, you know I don't eat food that's completely black," Miranda complained when the pasta arrived. "And I'm more of a meat person," Philip added, scanning the menu for alternatives. I apologized and ordered additional dishes to accommodate their preferences, watching the bill climb with each addition. Throughout the meal, they seemed more interested in critiquing neighboring diners' attire than engaging in conversation with me. When I tried sharing memories of visiting Venice with Catherine, Miranda checked her watch. "Sorry, Dad, but can we wrap this up? There's a rooftop bar at the hotel that's supposed to be amazing, and we wanted to meet some people we connected with on Instagram who are staying nearby." We returned to the hotel, and I retreated to my bedroom while they went out. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of them returning, laughing loudly with unfamiliar voices. Apparently, they'd brought their new acquaintances back to our shared suite. I put in earplugs and tried to sleep, fighting disappointment. The next day brought disaster. After a morning visiting St. Mark's Basilica, where Philip complained about having to remove his designer sunglasses inside the sacred space, we had lunch at a small canal-side restaurant. The seafood tasted delicious, but by evening I developed severe stomach cramps. Back at the hotel, I barely made it to the bathroom before being violently ill. Food poisoning gripped me with alternating fever and chills, my body rejecting anything, including water. From the bathroom, I could hear Miranda and Philip in the suite's living area discussing their plans for the next day in Paris. "Should we check on your dad?" Philip asked, his voice carrying through the door. "He's been in there forever." "He's fine," Miranda replied dismissively. "Probably just ate something that didn't agree with him." No knock came at the door, no offer of medication or assistance. I was too ill to call out, focused solely on surviving the waves of nausea. Hours passed, and as the worst symptoms finally began to subside around midnight, I heard their voices again, now lowered, but still audible through the thin bathroom door. "This trip would be amazing without your dad trailing behind us everywhere," Philip said. His voice slightly slurred from wine. "That old man is only bothering us, always with the history lessons and the 'when your mother and I' stories." My heart froze, waiting for Miranda to defend me. Instead, I heard her laugh. "I know he's so embarrassing with all his history lessons and trying to talk to every local in his terrible Italian." "Let's do it," Philip continued excitedly. "Tomorrow we're supposed to take the train to Paris. What if we accidentally miss it? We could say there was a mix-up with the tickets. We'll fly straight to Barcelona instead. I checked, and there are morning flights available." "What about Dad?" Miranda asked, though her tone suggested concern about logistics rather than my welfare. "He's an adult. He'll figure it out," Philip replied. "He's got all the hotel reservations and train tickets organized in that ridiculous travel binder he carries. He'll probably enjoy Paris more without us cramping his style anyway." Miranda giggled. "You're terrible," she said, but her tone was admiring rather than reproachful. "But you're right. He's been traveling since before we were born. He'll be fine, and we can finally enjoy ourselves without the constant history tours." Sitting on the cold tile floor, still weak from illness, I felt something break inside me. The daughter I had sacrificed everything for, the child I had raised alone after losing Catherine, was laughing at the prospect of abandoning me in a foreign country while I was sick. When I finally emerged from the bathroom, the suite was dark and quiet, their bedroom door closed. I collapsed into my bed, shivering despite the warm night, feeling more alone than I had since Catherine's death. Morning arrived with bright Venetian sunshine streaming through the windows and an empty suite. Their bedroom door stood open, revealing stripped beds and empty closets. On the dining table lay a hastily scribbled note. "Dad, went for early sightseeing. See you at train station later. M and P." But their luggage was gone. All of it. Even the extra shopping bags from Florence. With a sinking feeling, I called the front desk. "Excuse me, but have my daughter and son-in-law checked out?" "Yes, Mr. Harrison," the clerk confirmed. "They left very early this morning. They asked us to inform you they had a change of plans and would contact you directly. They settled their portion of the incidentals with their own credit card." I sat heavily on the antique sofa, the note crumpled in my hand. Within minutes, a text arrived from Miranda. "Service spotty here. Schedule conflict came up with Philip's business. Had to make emergency change. Enjoy Paris. Call when you get to Barcelona." The lie was transparent. There was no service issue. She'd sent a text. There was no business emergency. Philip had planned this escape last night. They had abandoned me, still weak from food poisoning in Venice, laughing about the old man who was only bothering them as they walked away. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside me. The hurt was overwhelming, but beneath it, a steely resolve began to form. For years, I had given everything, emotionally, financially, practically, and received increasingly less in return. I had enabled their entitlement, their disrespect, their exploitation of my generosity. As I looked out at the Venetian canal, watching gondolas glide past with happy tourists, I made a decision. This pattern would end now. After a lifetime of putting Miranda first, it was time to stand up for myself. If they wanted independence from the bothering old man, I would give it to them, in ways they couldn't begin to imagine. I sat in my Venetian hotel room, physically weakened by food poisoning, but mentally sharpening into focus. The initial shock of betrayal gave way to clarity as I examined the situation from all angles. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up my phone and called Miranda, unsurprised when it went straight to voicemail after a single ring, the universal sign of a deliberately declined call. "Miranda, it's Dad. I know you can see this call. I'm aware you and Philip have left Venice without me. Please call me back immediately to explain." My voice remained steady despite the storm of emotions. 10 minutes later, a text arrived. "Really bad reception here. Last-minute opportunity for Philip's business. We'll explain everything when service better. Enjoy Paris. We'll meet up in Barcelona as planned." The deliberate deception stung more than the abandonment itself. I replied simply, "I know that's not true. We need to talk." No response followed. Through the night, I barely slept, my mind replaying years of interactions in a new light. The wedding I'd emptied my accounts to fund. The house down payment that had stretched my retirement savings. Philip's failing business I'd invested in without seeing any financial statements. The credit cards I still paid for. The luxury car lease I'd co-signed. But beyond the financial support, I remembered countless moments of emotional investment met with decreasing returns. Birthday calls that went to voicemail. Holidays where I was seated at the end of the table away from the main conversation. Advice sought, but then ignored. Photos where I was cropped out before being posted online. By morning, a strange calm had replaced my hurt and anger. I called my longtime friend and attorney Thomas, waking him despite the time difference. "Walter, are you all right?" "It's 3 a.m. here. I'm in Venice, Tom, alone. Miranda and Philip abandoned me during our trip. I need legal advice about my financial entanglements with them." Thomas had known me for 40 years since our college days. He'd been at my wedding to Catherine and had helped with her funeral arrangements. He didn't waste time with platitudes. "Tell me everything," he said, and I did, from the house I'd helped them buy to the business investments and ongoing financial support. "The house is the key," Thomas said after listening. "You said you're on the deed as co-owner to help them qualify for the mortgage." "Yes, I own 30% officially, but I paid the entire down payment." "And Philip's business? What's the legal structure of your investment?" "I'm listed as a silent partner with a 40% stake, though I've never received any profit statements." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Walter, from what you're telling me, you have considerable legal leverage. As co-owner of the house, you have the right to force a sale. As a business partner, you're entitled to financial transparency and could potentially take control if obligations haven't been met." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you have options. If you want to disentangle yourself, you can do so from a position of strength." He paused. "The question is, what do you want, Walter?" What did I want? I gazed out at the Venetian morning, watching an elderly couple walking arm in arm along the canal. They leaned on each other equally, a partnership of mutual support. The contrast with my own situation couldn't have been clearer. "I want respect," I said finally. "I want to stop being used, and I want consequences for actions." "Then come home, and we'll make that happen," Thomas replied. "I'll start preparing the paperwork today." And within hours, I had changed my return flight, paying a hefty fee to fly directly back to the United States the following day. I sent one final text to Miranda. "I've changed my plans as well. Flying home tomorrow. We'll talk when you return from your trip." Her reply came quickly this time. "Dad, don't be dramatic. We'll explain everything in Barcelona." I didn't respond. Instead, I spent my last day in Venice, visiting the church where Catherine and I had lit candles on our honeymoon. I lit one for her and asked silently what she would advise. The peaceful space gave me no miraculous answers, but strengthened my resolve to stop enabling behavior she would have found appalling. The transatlantic flight gave me hours to consider my next steps. While other passengers watched movies or slept, I filled a notebook with detailed accountings. Every loan, every gift, every investment I'd made in Miranda and Philip's lives. The total was staggering, representing nearly a third of my retirement savings. I also listed the emotional investments, the canceled plans I'd accepted without complaint, the dismissive comments I'd overlooked, the gradual erosion of mutual respect. This accounting was even more painful than the financial one. By the time the plane touched down on American soil, my plan was fully formed. The Walter who had left for Europe 3 weeks earlier, eager to please, afraid of confrontation, endlessly accommodating, had been left behind in Venice. The man who returned carried a quiet determination that straightened his shoulders despite his physical exhaustion. Thomas met me at the airport, his presence a solid comfort after the emotional turmoil. "I've drafted the initial documents," he said, as we drove toward my home. "But there's something else you should know. I had my assistant do some preliminary research on Philip's business. And it's worse than we thought. He's been using your investment to cover personal expenses rather than business costs. The company hasn't filed proper tax returns in 2 years, and there are signs of other financial improprieties." I nodded, unsurprised. "What's our first step?" "We file to force the sale of the house. As co-owner, it's your legal right. Given the current market, it should sell quickly and for a good price. And their belongings." Thomas glanced at me. "Legally, anything you've purchased remains yours until gifted formally. Without documentation stating they were gifts, items like furniture, appliances, and electronics technically still belong to you." That evening, sitting in my quiet house, I made the first call to a real estate agent I trusted. "Nancy, I need to sell a property quickly and discreetly," I explained. "Your house." "But you designed it yourself," she exclaimed. "No, my daughter and son-in-law's house. I'm a co-owner, and circumstances require liquidating the asset." The next morning began a whirlwind of activity. Thomas filed the legal paperwork to force the sale, while I inventoried every item in Miranda and Philip's home that I had purchased. Furniture, electronics, appliances, even artwork and kitchenware. The list was extensive, representing years of generous gifts I had never documented as such. I hired a professional estate sale company recommended by Nancy. "We need to clear the house completely within 2 weeks," I instructed the manager, a no-nonsense woman named Diane. "Family situation?" she asked perceptively. "Something like that," I replied. "We see it more often than you'd think," she said kindly. "We'll be efficient and respectful." The most difficult task was removing family photos and personal mementos. I carefully boxed Miranda's childhood keepsakes, her mother's jewelry I'd given her over the years, and irreplaceable photographs. These I stored in a separate climate-controlled facility, not included in the sale. Despite my hurt, I couldn't bring myself to dispose of these connections to our shared past and to Catherine's memory. As word spread through their neighborhood about the unexpected sale, neighbors approached me with questions I answered vaguely. "Family changes requiring reorganization" became my standard response. A few seemed unsurprised, mentioning Philip's tendency to boast about financial successes that seemed improbable given his struggling business. "He was telling everyone at the block party about buying a vacation home in Aspen," one neighbor confided. but then I noticed they couldn't even afford to replace their broken sprinkler system. The house sold within 5 days, for well above asking price, the hot real estate market working in my favor. The estate sale followed with high-end furniture, designer clothes, and luxury appliances quickly purchased by eager buyers. I directed the proceeds into an escrow account Thomas had established, ensuring transparent documentation of every transaction. Concurrently, I cleared out Philip's business office, discovering stacks of unopened bills and collection notices. The expensive furnishings, which my investment had paid for, went to auction. I found and secured important business documents that revealed the extent of Philip's mismanagement, including evidence he had been falsely using my name and professional reputation to secure clients. Each night returning to my own home, I experienced conflicting emotions. The pain of betrayal remained sharp, but it was increasingly accompanied by a sense of empowerment I hadn't felt in years. For too long, I had confused unconditional love with unconditional giving. The two I was learning were not the same. With Thomas's guidance, I calculated a fair division of proceeds from the house sale and business liquidation. Despite everything, I ensured Miranda and Philip would receive the portion legally and ethically due to them. I arranged for a small, furnished apartment to be rented in their name for 3 months, basic but comfortable accommodations that would give them time to re-establish themselves. Throughout this process, Miranda called several times her messages, growing increasingly confused, as friends apparently informed her of activity at her house. I let each call go to voicemail, not yet ready for that conversation. This wasn't about avoidance, but timing. I wanted all arrangements completed before we spoke. 2.5 weeks after my return from Venice with the house sold, possessions liquidated, and funds secured in properly documented accounts, I received a text from Miranda. "Landing tomorrow at 2 p.m. Need you to pick us up from airport, since we can't find our house keys. Thanks." The casual presumption, the lack of any explanation for their abandonment, and the expectation of continued accommodation crystallized my resolve. I texted back a simple response: "I'll be there." The international arrivals terminal bustled with reunions, families embracing children, running to grandparents, couples kissing passionately after separations. I stood apart from these joyful scenes, a still figure in pressed khakis and a blue button-down shirt, watching the doors where passengers emerged from customs. I spotted them immediately. Miranda in oversized sunglasses and a flowing maxi dress. Philip in designer jeans and loafers without socks, both tanned and relaxed. They were laughing about something completely at ease until Miranda's eyes met mine. Her smile faltered slightly before brightening again with artificial enthusiasm. "Dad," she called, approaching for a hug that I accepted stiffly. "You didn't have to meet us inside. We could have found you at passenger pickup." Philip extended his hand. "Walter, good to see you. How was Paris? Man, those museums were right up your alley." The casual pretense that nothing was amiss struck me as both calculated and cruel. I maintained my composure, my voice level. "We need to talk. Let's get your bags and find somewhere quiet." Miranda's expression shifted to concern. "Is everything okay? You seem upset." "We'll discuss it shortly," I replied, already walking toward baggage claim. Their lighthearted chatter continued as we collected their luggage, significantly more than they'd left, with evidence of extensive shopping. In the parking garage, Miranda looked confused when I led them to my modest sedan, rather than driving to the short-term lot where they'd left their luxury SUV. "Where's our car?" she asked. "That's part of what we need to discuss," I answered, loading their bags into my trunk. Rather than heading toward their neighborhood, I drove to a small coffee shop near my attorney's office. Miranda grew increasingly agitated as unfamiliar surroundings replaced expected routes. "Dad, where are we going? We're tired from the flight. We just want to go home. Shower and rest. This won't take long, I assured her, pulling into the parking lot. Inside, I selected a corner table away from other customers and ordered 3 coffees. Once seated, I placed a thick manila envelope on the table between us. Miranda stared at it apprehensively, while Philip maintained his confident smile. So, Walter, what's this mysterious meeting about? You're acting very dramatic. I want to begin by asking if either of you has anything to say about what happened in Venice. They exchanged quick glances before Miranda leaned forward. Dad, we're really sorry about the confusion. Philip got an emergency call about a potential investor for his business, and we had to change our plans suddenly. We tried to reach you, but the service was terrible. That's not true, I stated flatly. I overheard your conversation the night before you left. You planned to abandon me while I was ill 'cause I was bothering you and embarrassing you. Color drained from Miranda's face. Philip's smile disappeared. You misunderstood, he attempted. That was just private venting after a stressful day. No, it wasn't. It was a calculated plan that you executed, leaving me alone and sick in a foreign country without concern for my well-being. Miranda's eyes filled with tears. Dad, we were going to explain everything in Barcelona. It was just a little detour for ourselves. A 10-day detour where you ignored my calls and messages. I shook my head. But this isn't just about Venice. This is about a pattern that's been building for years, taking financial and emotional support while returning disrespect and exploitation. I opened the envelope and removed a document. This is the deed to your house, rather your former house. As co-owner, I exercised my legal right to sell the property. It closed last week. Philip's face contorted with shock and anger. You can't do that. That's our home. Legally, I could, and I did. The deed shows my 30% ownership, though I provided 100% of the down payment. I placed another document beside the first. This is the receipt for the estate sale that liquidated the furniture, appliances, and electronics I purchased over the years. Miranda's mouth opened and closed without sound, her hand gripping the edge of the table. You sold our things, she finally whispered. I sold my things, I corrected gently. Items I paid for without documentation of gifting. However, I continued, removing another paper. I've secured all truly personal belongings. Your photos, keepsakes, and family mementos. Those are in storage, and you'll have full access. Philip's initial shock transformed into calculation. This is illegal. We'll sue you. Thomas had prepared me for this reaction. You're welcome to consult an attorney, but I've followed proper legal procedures throughout. My attorney has extensive documentation of my financial contributions versus yours. I placed a final document on the table, a cashier's check. This represents your rightful portion of the house sale proceeds after accounting for my down payment and co-ownership percentage. It's a substantial sum that should help you restart. Miranda stared at the check, tears now flowing freely. Where are we supposed to live? I've rented a 2-bedroom apartment for you, I explained, sliding over a key and address. It's paid for 3 months, giving you time to make arrangements. Your personal items will be delivered there tomorrow. Philip's face had reddened dangerously. You vindictive old man. You did all this because we wanted a few days to ourselves. No, I answered calmly. I did this because for years I've enabled behavior that's unhealthy for all of us. You've come to see me as a resource to be exploited rather than a person to be respected. This isn't revenge. It's a necessary reset. I stood to leave, but Miranda grabbed my arm. Dad, please. We can fix this. We'll find another house. We'll do family counseling. Whatever you want. For a moment, her desperate expression reminded me of the little girl who'd cried when she fell off her bicycle, looking to me to make everything better. but we were long past skinned knees and simple solutions. This isn't about what I want, Miranda. It's about consequences for choices made. You both decided I was no longer family when it was convenient for you. I'm simply honoring that decision by making us homeless," Philip interjected bitterly. "You're not homeless. You have an apartment, a substantial check, and your personal belongings. What you've lost is the unearned privilege of my continued financial support." I placed my coffee cup down gently. "I'll always be your father, Miranda. That door remains open if you want an authentic relationship based on mutual respect, but the bank of Dad is permanently closed." As I walked to my car, I heard Miranda sobbing and Philip's angry consolations. The sound pained me, but I recognized it as necessary. The sound of entitlement confronting reality of adulthood, finally arriving decades late. Driving home, I felt neither triumph nor vindication, only the quiet peace of having finally stood up for my own worth after years of allowing it to be diminished. Whatever came next would at least be built on truth rather than exploitation. I didn't know if Miranda would eventually choose a real relationship with me. I hoped she would. But for the first time in decades, my happiness didn't depend on her choices. That realization, more than any legal document or financial settlement, represented the true change Venice had catalyzed in my life. 1 month after my airport confrontation with Miranda and Philip, I received a text asking if she could visit, alone. I agreed, setting boundaries by suggesting coffee at a neutral location rather than my home. When she arrived at the cafe, I barely recognized her. Gone were the designer clothes and expertly styled hair, replaced by simple jeans and a ponytail that reminded me of her college days. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. Her eyes held a wariness I'd never seen before. "How are you adjusting?" I asked, genuinely concerned despite everything. She stirred her coffee slowly. "It's been educational. The apartment is actually nice, clean, functional, but it's strange not having all our things." She paused. "Philip and I are seeing a counselor, separately and together." "That sounds positive." "He didn't want to come today. He's still very angry." I nodded, unsurprised. "And you?" "I was angry too," she admitted. "Furious, actually. Then devastated. Then something else happened." She reached into her purse and removed a small notebook. "I started writing down every financial thing you've done for us since my wedding. Every gift, every loan, every investment." I filled 20 pages. I waited, sensing she needed to continue without interruption. Then I tried to list what we've given back. Not repaid, just given. Attention, respect, gratitude. Her voice cracked slightly. That list was very short. A tear slipped down her cheek, which she quickly wiped away. "The counselor asked me to imagine if a friend described our relationship from the outside. What would I tell that friend about their father? The answer was, hard to face. I never wanted to hurt you, Miranda," I said softly. "But continuing as we were was hurting all of us. I know that now." She squared her shoulders. "I got a job. Administrative assistant at an architectural firm, actually. The pay isn't great, but it's a start." "You always had a good eye for design," I offered. "Like your mother." A genuine smile briefly transformed her face. "I've been thinking about her a lot, what she would say about all this." The smile faded. "She would be so disappointed in me. She would want you to learn and grow just as I do." Miranda stared into her coffee cup. "Philip and I are struggling. Without the financial cushion, all our differences are more obvious. He expected me to blame you for everything, but when I started taking responsibility for my own actions, he got defensive." I wasn't surprised, but kept my thoughts neutral. Marriage takes work from both people. "We never really had to work at anything before," she admitted. "Everything was just provided. We talked for nearly 2 hours, covering difficult truths and painful recognitions. Unlike our previous interactions, where conversation stayed superficial, this dialogue had substance, the beginning of authentic communication between adults rather than the performative roles of indulgent father and entitled daughter. As we prepared to leave, Miranda asked hesitantly, "Would it be okay if I called you next week? Maybe we could have dinner." "I'd like that," I said, "but I'd prefer if it were just us for now." She nodded in understanding. Just us. Over the following months, these meetings became regular occurrences. Sometimes we simply shared a meal and casual conversation. Other times we navigated harder discussions about the past and expectations for our future relationship. Miranda started bringing her portfolio of design ideas, seeking my professional opinion in a way she hadn't since early college. 6 months after the Venice trip, Miranda arrived for our dinner with news. "Philip and I are separating," she said without preamble. "He's moving to Chicago for a job opportunity." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it, despite my private relief. "I'm not," she replied with surprising conviction. "The counselor helped me see how much of myself I'd surrendered to become what he wanted. Without the house and lifestyle props, it became obvious we wanted very different things." She'd found a small apartment she could afford on her own salary, which had increased with a promotion to design assistant. She was taking night classes to refresh her architectural knowledge. Most importantly, she was standing on her own feet for perhaps the first time in her adult life. "Dad," she said during dessert, "I need to properly apologize for Venice. What we did was cruel and inexcusable. I've been ashamed to really face it directly, but you deserve a real apology. I'm truly sorry for abandoning you when you were sick, for the things we said, for treating you as an accessory rather than my father." The apology, delivered without qualification or expectation, represented a turning point. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Thank you. That means a great deal to me." The relationship we've been rebuilding is fundamentally different from what came before. It's based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence, on authentic connection rather than obligation. We've established clear boundaries. I've made it explicit that I won't provide financial support beyond occasional gifts for special occasions, and she hasn't asked. Last month, Miranda invited me to her new apartment for dinner, the first meal she'd cooked for me in years. The space was modest but tastefully arranged with second-hand furniture she'd refinished herself. On her drawing table sat plans for a small renovation project she'd been hired to design independently. "I'm thinking about using some of Mom's favorite elements," she explained, showing me the Mediterranean influences in her concept. "Remember how she loved those arched doorways in the house you designed for us? She would have loved this," I said truthfully, noting how Miranda's own aesthetic had emerged once freed from Philip's preference for showy opulence. As we ate the simple but delicious meal she'd prepared, I reflected on how the painful rupture in Venice had ultimately created space for something healthier to grow. The financial disentanglement had forced emotional honesty neither of us might have found otherwise. Life rarely offers perfect resolutions. The hurt of being abandoned by my daughter in Venice will always remain a painful memory. But that moment of crisis forced us to confront patterns that had been damaging both of us for years. Sometimes what appears to be an ending becomes instead the necessary clearing for a new beginning. If you've ever had to make the difficult choice between maintaining peace and demanding respect, I hope my story offers some comfort. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's often the most loving thing we can do, both for ourselves and for those who need to grow. Have you ever had to take a stand that seemed harsh, but ultimately led to healing? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more reflections on family boundaries and the courage it sometimes takes to redefine relationships. Thank you for listening to my journey.